Over the years, I've developed a top 10 list of questions that people ask me, or perhaps they ask any futurologists when they meet him or her. And the first question is almost always, well, what's going to win the local horse race? Or what the lottery number's going to be this coming weekend? And of course that masks a certain nervousness, a certain idea that they don't really know what a futurologist does. And that's the second question. What is a futurologist? Well, a futurologist, of course, is somebody who studies the present, because you can't study the future. You study today's trends, you try to work out how they may interact in the future, you suggest things that may happen based on experience, analysis and research, and that's the job. The third question people ask, and it's not uncommon, although it's a bit cheeky, is, well, how do I know if you're any good? I suppose that's an understandable question, because people say, well, I won't be here talking to you in 20 or 30 years. How do I know if what you have to say has any value, has any weight? And the only answer I can give to that is that I've been doing this 35 years. And if people are really interested, they can look back at my books from the early 1980s or the mid-1980s, and they can see for themselves. They can make the judgment, because I'm now living in the future I described 30-odd years ago. Did I get it right, is the key question. And the answer is, of course, I got more right than I got wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this job. And then people say, well, how do you study the future? What do you do? And as I've just said, you can't study the future itself, but you study those trends that you think are likely to shape the future. And it's intense daily research which is the key. When I speak, I don't use notes or slides, and people say, well, how do you do that? And the answer is because I spend my entire working life preparing for each book I write, or for each lecture I give, or for each keynote presentation. And as people get more sort of confident that you might actually be somebody with thoughts about the future, they ask the sort of questions they've always wanted to ask. Are we alone? Are there any aliens out there? Is sort of number 5 question. Well, the answer to that is, of course, there may be intelligences out there, but because of the limitations of time and distance, the size of space, it's extremely unlikely that within the foreseeable future, by which I mean centuries, we're ever going to make any sort of contact. Just the differences in timescale almost certainly rule out contact with intelligent life forms. And then I'm asked, are computers going to become more clever than humans? And of course the question is slightly wrong, but I do understand the question, and the answer is computers will become as capable of problem solving as humans sometime later this century. And soon after they'll be twice as capable, 4 times as capable, and so on. Is this a big deal? Should we be worrying about it? You bet. We call it the Technological Singularity, because we can't see what's going to happen after that point. When will it happen? It could be as early as 2030, more likely I think 2040, 2050. But we're going to have to decide how we're going to cope with machines as capable as we are and more capable. And then people say, well, what about killer robots? And I say, well, it's a major issue. Some of the world's greatest brains have recently warned against the danger of autonomous killing machines. The problem is, how do you regulate this? How do you control it? Because if we in the West decide to regulate it and control it, can we be sure that North Korea, for example, won't chase autonomous killing machines? And then people sort of want to talk about religion. They say, well, you don't seem to talk about religion very much. Isn't it something that interests you? And I say, yes, it interests me, but it's more of an event driver than it is of a big trend. I mean, events may come out of religious disturbance, like terrorism, like mass migration, but it isn't really going to affect the overall shape of the future. People then say, well, Ray, you appear to be an optimist. How can you be an optimist about the future when such terrible things are happening in the world? And I say, because I'm an optimist, because if you look at the curve of human history over the last couple of 100 years, in the developed world, it's been up and up. Yes, there have been terrible events like the First World War, the Second World War, Stalinism, and so on. But overall, in terms of health, in terms of economic wealth, and so on, in the developed world, things have got better and better and better. And I am certain they're going to continue to do so. And finally, the number 10 question is, how do I become a futurologist? And the answer is, well, it's open to anybody. There's no difficult professional entrance exam to pass, but I know that experience, knowing how to research, and a hunger for knowledge are the key elements to becoming a futurologist. Although there are really excellent future studies courses at various universities, I don't think anyone can really seriously contemplate being a futurologist or a futurist, which is the American term for the profession, until they're at least 40, maybe 45, because it takes experience to look back to judge which trends you've identified correctly and incorrectly in the past. Anyone can be a futurologist, and these 10 questions are the questions that people ask most often when I meet them.